Welcome to Trashmagination, a podcast about reimagining trash. I'm Carla Brown. Today, our topic is musical instruments made from trash. I'm going to discuss 3 ideas around this topic, which are, first, performance groups who make musical instruments from trash. Second, how to make some simple instruments from trash. And I have some here in the closet that I've made, and I will play them so you can hear how they sound. And then finally, I'm going to talk about things that you can make from recycled musical instruments. I think musical instruments are a great way to engage people on the topic of creative reuse because it appeals to our sense of hearing rather than sight. Sometimes people dismiss items that are made from recycled materials because they don't like their aesthetics. But if you don't look at it, but you're just listening to it, you cannot deny the beautiful sounds that can be created from recycled materials. So the first topic is performance groups who make musical instruments from trash. My very first Trashmagination blog on Christmas Day in 2012 was about a movie called Landfill Harmonic, and I hope you've heard of this. It's a movie that was made about a group in Paraguay called Orquestra de Reciclados de Catura. Now, Catura is the largest landfill near Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, and the orchestra was put together by Fabio Chavez, working with local people to build all sorts of orchestral music from trash. Now, I am not a conductor. I am not an expert in those types of musical instruments, but when I hear them, they sound exactly like the professional kind that are made from things that are not made from trash. I recommend that you check out the TED Talk with Fabio, where he explains how the instruments are made, and you can see some of his students perform. Now, later this month, I'm going to see a group called Scrap Arts in a theater near me here in Maryland on April 20th. I am very excited to see Scrap Arts because they are a Canadian group, and you probably have figured this out if you've listened to this podcast for a while. I'm Canadian, and they have built their instruments from trash materials. Most of their instruments are percussion, and I am a taiko drummer, so I love percussion shows. Now, many percussion groups play on recycled materials. Maybe you've heard of a group called Stomp. This group started in 1991, and it's been playing for almost 30 years. I saw them at least 20 years ago in Ottawa. In episode 12 of my podcast that I made about a year ago, I talked about taiko and creative reuse. And as I mentioned, then I play taiko with the group Nendaiko. Now, taiko are Japanese drums, and they are great examples of musical instruments made from recycled materials. Here in North America, they are typically made from recycled whiskey barrels. So if you're interested in learning more about that, check out episode 12. Okay, moving away from percussion instruments, are you familiar with the word luthier? It means a person who makes stringed instruments. Now, Zeke Leonard is a professor at the University of Syracuse, and I mentioned him a few episodes ago, episode 21, about scrap wood reuse. He makes banjos from recycled pianos. Apparently, lots of pianos are thrown away, and Zeke has found that the wood is just great for making other musical instruments. Zeke also teaches people how to make banjos from a can, or canjos, and he also teaches folks how to make diddley bows, which are stringed instruments that wrap around pretty much any object. Another luthier is Ken Butler. He pushes the limits of what can be made into a stringed instrument. His instruments often look like optical illusions because they have such unusual shapes. For example, he used a snowshoe to make a cello. He has made over 400 instruments from items such as wooden hangers, guns, golf clubs, chairbacks, a hatchet, a cowboy boot, a wooden sled, crutches, skeletons, shovels, and mannequins. He lives in the New York area. I would love to see him perform sometime, and his website is called Ken Butler's Hybrid Visions. The last performance group I'll mention is Bash the Trash. They originate from New Jersey and they visit many schools and community events where they teach people how to make musical instruments from recycled materials. And some of the instruments that I made today were based on their online tutorials. I would love to hear about any performance groups who make items from trash. I'm sure that there are hundreds. Often when I see videos of music from around the world, the instruments are clearly made from whatever was available. So please let me know your favorite groups who make items from recycled materials at trashmagination@gmail.com. The next section of our episode is about how to make musical instruments from trash. Now, I was born in Newfoundland, and a popular instrument there is called an ugly stick. Now, this looks like an upside-down mop stuck into a rubber boot with lots of metal caps hanging on sticks along the sides. The floppy part of the mop goes on the top, and people sometimes take a tin can and give it a face, and the mop forms the hair. It makes a great sound. It's kind of like a combination of a tambourine and a drum, and you thump it on the floor. So here's a little clip of an ugly stick. The way to play an ugly stick is to thump it on the floor while hitting it with a shorter stick. And sometimes that handheld shorter stick has notches in it that you can rub against the tall stick and it makes a quick sound, sort of like grrr type of sound. Often the ugly stick is an accompaniment to an accordion or a harmonica. Ugly sticks are most often made around Christmas time because they are part of a tradition called mummering, where you dress up in all your clothes or your family members' clothes, hopefully to the point where you are not recognizable. And then you visit your neighbors for a scuff and a scoff or a dance and some food. I'll share a video in the show notes that shows how to make an ugly stick, and also I'll link to a page from a group that made an ugly stick workshop where people learned how to make their own. There are so many musical instruments that you can make from trash other than an ugly stick. I put together a bunch of tutorials on my Pinterest that show lots of ideas. And I mentioned Bash the Trash. They have great video tutorials. Here's an instrument that I made based on their tutorial. It is a rubber band guitar. So that's a surprisingly satisfying sound for a cardboard box with rubber bands wrapped around it. I also made a xylophone from glass bottles filled with different amounts of water. Now, sometimes with Nendaiko, I play the maracas, and I don't actually own a pair of maracas, but I found a container of plastic beads on my sewing table, and they kind of sound like maracas. So here's a demonstration. Now, I tried out recording the sound of myself playing my gomi daiko. A gomi daiko is a daiko made from a trash can. Gomi means trash. And it is how I practice at home. And it does not record well at all with my microphone. It just sounds like plop, plop, plop. So I'm not going to play that for you. But if you are interested in making a gomi daiko, a plastic trash can taiko, I'm going to link to the page on my website where I talked about making that for myself. So our next topic is making items from recycled musical instruments. Now, my family, we bought a clarinet secondhand for my daughter when she was in elementary school, and she played it for 4 years. Particularly towards the end, she was playing it almost every day. And of course, we did our regular maintenance, taking it to our local music technician, but she played it so much, and it was secondhand to begin with, that finally our technician said it would cost more to replace the parts than what the instrument was worth. So that got me thinking, I'm sure this happens all the time, particularly with the less expensive instruments that are purchased for students, and what could be done with all these old instruments. So I did some research. Of course, if your instrument is still in good condition, there are lots of people who would love to have it. You can either sell it secondhand, like we purchased ours secondhand, or you can donate them to programs that help students who can't afford to purchase or rent instruments. And I'm sure if you reach out to your local school or you Google donate musical instruments, you will find lots of community organizations who would love your instrument. But for instruments that are beyond repair, you might check out my Pinterest board. I noticed that for a lot of instruments, people transform them into furniture or lamps. So, for example, with my daughter's clarinet, the best ideas I saw were a lamp where the clarinet was the post holding up the lampshade. I also saw earrings made from the circular metal keys. And in one case, an artist painted the clarinet with bright colors and designs. So it became a colorful art object, and that looked the most fun to me. So I might suggest to my daughter that we do that. There are lots of instruments made into furniture, for example, pianos, and I see woodworkers making them into benches or bookcases or desks. I even saw one with an aquarium installed into the top of where the piano top used to be. For the strings that are involved with the piano or with guitar, there are many jewelry crafts that you can make. And if you practice music, you will start having a big pile of sheet music. And there are lots of crafts that you can make from sheet music. Certainly scrapbookers like it, but also I saw a lot of origami type of crafts, maybe a paper poinsettia made from Christmas music. And I saw crafts where people framed a particularly meaningful piece of sheet music and then wrote a relevant inspirational message on the sheet music with beautiful hand lettering. If you have made items from recycled musical instruments, particularly clarinets, please let me know at trashmagination@gmail.com. Trashmagination this is the 44th episode, and I'm very excited about that. I hope that you are sharing the story of Trashmagination with your friends and family. I've been scanning the world, and I've yet to find another podcast about creative reuse. So I think we're one of a kind, and I hope that more and more people can start hearing about it. So please let your friends and your family know how to either download the podcast using the podcast app, or you can always just go to trashmagination.com and listen directly there. Until next time, may you see trash as a source of music in your life.